Geralt of Rivia is a gorgeous, rugged and handsome, just absolute badass of a man. My name is Colin Mahern, I'm none of those things. But the man with me right now is all of them in spades. That's Ray Wilmot. Ray, how are ya?
I'm good, thank you. How are you, Gil?
I'm not too bad now. To be honest, I'm actually very excited to talk about The Witcher 3. I suppose possibly the most anticipated game coming out this year. Like it had a few delays along the way, but I think some of those delays have possibly even helped developer CD Projekt Red by drumming up even more anticipation. But yeah, so you recently got to play it.
I did, yep.
And how long did you actually have with it?
About 3 hours, actually, so a very long demo.
Okay, yeah, so you got a decent chunk of time with it. And did they just throw you in somewhere kind of in the middle, or was it actually the first 3 hours, or where did they start you?
Basically, literally at the prologue of the game. So you literally start off from the tutorial section effectively, then you get a bit of a tutorial taste, and then you go straight into the prologue section of the game, really.
So there are, I suppose, a number of things we can kind of tackle here. Like, first of all, if we just kind of look at the gameplay and this new combat system that they've kind of touted, how did you find it much different to The Witcher 2, and what exactly kind of what new things are in this in The Witcher 3 with regards combat?
Well, I mean, the first thing to say, I guess, is that I played it on Xbox One. We had the option to play it on PC or PS4, so I got to try on Xbox One, and I had previously tried and played The Witcher 2 on Xbox 360. Certainly, the first thing I think that's going to strike anyone is that compared to The Witcher 2 on the Xbox 360, The Witcher 3 is a much more comfortable fit on consoles. The controls are much more responsive. They feel as if they're a better fit for dual analogs and set buttons. But yeah, the combat itself is great. I mean, there's a lot of you can obviously focus on your opponents as general, and you can kind of evade and dodge attacks as they come towards you. There's a real emphasis on using the sign casting as well as using that with another weapon, which I'll talk to you about a bit later. But essentially, you do get given a crossbow as well as your sword. Which with a crossbow is a real effective combination of firing away with your arrows while you're also like doing deflection, kind of like the Witcher's version of Fusrudar.
Okay, yeah.
So you've got some of that in there, but you can also use sign casting to set fire to your opponents if they get too close to you. There's all kinds of things with the combat, and it just feels a lot more responsive and a lot better, basically.
So is that the main takeaway from it? It is. A lot of it is very similar to The Witcher 2, but just more fluid.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's Witcher fans will feel very comfortable going straight in. Basically, sign casting is you're very used to it. It's an RPG staple, and obviously the sword combat is very familiar. So you've got your big lunges, which you can hold the button in to attack, or you've got your short strikes, which you can deflect opponents away. I think the one thing to master is going to be parrying, which I think Dark Souls fans will probably find quite appealing. So if you basically, as soon as an attack comes towards you, you parry that attack. If you parry it at the right moment, then it creates a whole new sort of a counter attack from Geralt. Yeah, and I think basically the developers themselves described it as a kind of a hardcore mix between Dragon Age and Dark Souls, sitting somewhere between in terms of the difficulty.
Yeah, you bring up Dark Souls. Now, I'm probably the only living person on this earth that couldn't give a flying fuck about Dark Souls, okay? Loads of other people love the series. That's fine. Whatever you want to do, that's perfect, right? Bring up Dark Souls, little bit worrying. Like, so you said, yeah, the difficulty sits somewhere in between a Dragon Age and a Dark Souls, so it's not as hardcore as a Dark Souls.
No, definitely not. I mean, I think Dark Souls is obviously very punishing with the way it dishes out death. The Witcher 3 isn't. I think it's a lot more comfortable. I think this is definitely newcomers to the series as well as fans of The Witcher are going to very much enjoy it. But at the same time, it will catch you off guard. For instance, enemies difficulty doesn't scale. So for instance, if you venture too far off in one area, you are going to probably fight an enemy that's about 5 or 6 levels higher than you, and you're going to get ripped to shreds.
Right.
Whereas if you you stick within the sort of confines of your mission area, obviously it's going to be a lot more comfortable and navigatable for your current level.
There's a few other little new tidbits that they've spoken about in kind of interviews and stuff, like this tracking system.
Yeah. With a tracking system, effectively, I think the best way to describe it is a bit like the detective vision in Arkham Knight and the Arkham series of games. Effectively, it's like your Witcher senses, you put them on, and then you kind of enter like this kind of blue haze. And within that, you can kind of see like the tracks of the creatures you're following. And basically, within the quest, it's used as a way to sort of track down your prey. Or to find clues to kind of further along the quest, and it's used in a variety of different ways in the prologue. For instance, you actually fight a giant griffin within the prologue, and the griffin itself is kind of like that's the end goal of the prologue. You have to defeat this creature, but it is kind of all set up towards that, and there's a nice build up from the beginning to end. So there's one instance where you actually have to follow the griffin to its nest. And actually sort of follow its tracks, follow the blood stains, and you effectively then from that point then you actually study the griffin. Once you've found that, you actually study him, you find out about its age, you find out about its build, you find out what sex it is, and it's all about then, once you've found that information out, it's then being able to use that to fight your opponent, and actually kind of find more about their strengths and weaknesses. It's really cool.
To fight, like to use that knowledge for fighting other griffins.
For the main griffin you're fighting, but also, I mean, what happens is you actually get a bestiary with a Witcher, and basically within the bestiary, every time you fight an enemy, that enemy goes into the bestiary, and within that, you actually find out more information about them. It tells you what their strengths and weaknesses are, what time of day or night they come out, when they're actually strongest of day or night, what kind of things you should use against them. So, for instance, if you want to use a particular sign, you recommend using that sign. Whether or not to have a potion when you go into battle, and that information obviously then carries throughout the game.
Pokedex, like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that'd be a good crossover, wouldn't it? The Witcher and
just imagine.
And Pokemon. No. As well as all these kind of little gameplay tweaks and stuff, some people are getting a little bit worried about them possibly disregarding some of the RPG-ness of the Witcher with regards, say, story and choices and stuff like that. Now, I know you didn't get to play an awful lot of it. You say, well, you played a decent chunk, but not enough to see choices, I would imagine, directly affect the world. But did you get much from them in terms of how choice will affect Wild Hunt?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, within the prologue, there are a few missions that you play, and there are multiple outcomes for those missions. I suppose the best example would be to use there was a blacksmith, and his house is completely destroyed, and the blacksmith tasks you with finding the person who did that, and he wants them brought to him. So you set off using your Witcher senses to kind of track this person, and you track it to a house, and you find the person there who's kind of really badly hungover, and the person is basically got really drunk the night before and said, "I'm sorry, I'm an arsonist," which it can happen.
Okay. Many a Saturday night. Yeah.
And with that, basically, you speak to the guy, and he's very apologetic. Says, "I'm sorry. He actually offers you more gold than the blacksmith does for bringing it to him. So you're left with that choice. Then, do you accept the gold and tell the blacksmith you couldn't find the person? Do you bring the person to the blacksmith, or do you just disregard the whole thing entirely?" My playthrough actually decided to take him to the blacksmith, and the consequences of that were quite brutal, in that the guy was basically taken off to be hung. So I thought to myself, I thought at the time I was doing the right thing, where actually it felt, once he was taken away to be hung, that perhaps it was a bit of a severe punishment for a silly mistake. But I mean, those kind of things, the developers have actually said that from all the small decisions you get to get involved into the bigger ones, they all have a direct impact on the world. Whether or not that's an instant reaction that you see or something you see much, much, much later on down the line. But it seems that... But the other thing to say as well is that morality system is no sort of paragon or renegade as you might see in Mass Effect. So
exactly. I love that about The Witcher 2 as well. It's just... there is no... Here's the blue choice, here's the red choice. It's just choose what you naturally would.
And that's the good thing about it, is that you don't. They make it clear that there is no good or bad choice. The choice is just a choice, and whatever happens from that choice, you have to deal with the consequences effectively. Whether or not that's it's all, you are going in blind in the sense, and whatever feels right to you. So I think that's cool. I like that about it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like, over your 3 hours, did you get to visit many kind of little villages or towns, or like speak to the townsfolk and have them say, "I need 6 golden necklaces," and all this kind of side quests, effectively, Ray? Like, how are they? How are they in The Witcher 3? Because again, as far as I'm aware, they're meant to be less of that fetch quest shit and meant to feel a bit more important as such.
Yeah, well, I mean, the main bulk of the prologue is actually on the road to Verima, and Verima's the town you actually go to visit. And where you actually go, when you go there, you effectively, it opens out once you reach the town. The townsfolk want different things. Like I mentioned, the blacksmith quests. There are also other quests that are involved as well. I would agree about the fetch quest thing, certainly. I mean, what I like about it is side quests, and the developers have actually said this. They've actually spent as much time on the side quests as they have on the main quests, so they've treated them like proper elements of the story. And one of the major things is basically what may appear to be an initial fetch quest, when you've actually set the quest off, the quest will actually deviate in a different direction. So where initially,
cool.
So what you might actually think, oh, I've actually got to pick this guy up, but then the narrative switches around, and suddenly perhaps you're actually got to be working on the side of the person you've got to collect, and then you have to do something else. So I mean, the quests are they're very good at basically making it feel fresh and different. And I think that's clear straight away, even from the prologue. I mean, I'm hoping that's going to keep it throughout the game. But they definitely feel very fresh and different, and especially with the Witcher scent as well.
Yeah, see, I suppose that is the other side of it, that like you played 3 hours of what is potentially a 50 to 100 hour game, I'd hazard a guess.
Yeah, they're roughly saying about that. Easy.
So like hopefully the side quests will continue that format throughout, because that does sound very good. The fact that, as you said, you start one and it might deviate and go down a different path. It's kind of interesting. But you said, so you were playing on the Xbox One?
Yeah.
Right, I have to ask you, Ray, how was it on consoles?
It's very smooth. It feels good. I mean, I looked around. Basically, I was in a room and there were PCs behind me, so I was actually trying to sneak glances around every now and again to see how it was running on PC. And obviously, I think it's clear to everyone that it's going to look better on PC than anywhere else, and that's acceptable. That's what it was built on originally. Having said that, the console version of the game does look superb. It's especially, I think the thing that really struck me the most is during conversation, and you get close up at people's faces, and it's lifelike. I mean, this is kind of the graphics that we've been waiting from new generation systems. They look absolutely superb. Whether or not it's the furrowing of a forehead or a droplet of sweat, it's superb. But I think you might have noticed as well, the lip syncing might seem slightly off. I think that's something that's going to come when it comes to launch. I think that's something that's still being worked on. But yeah, I mean, the vistas, everything, the graphics are just superb, and it's very smooth. There doesn't seem to be load-in screens everywhere. I think it's very seamless when you move in between areas. There didn't seem to be much slowdown in my playthrough. I think that CD Projekt Red really have developed a Witcher game for the consoles. It feels very good on consoles. So
The Witcher 2 did come to 360. I think it was like a year after it came to PCs, and it was, I suppose, it was many people's introduction to the Witcher in many ways. Like, they have spoken about some sort of save integration on PC, but is there anything that someone who played The Witcher 2 and maybe their 360 can take that to Xbox One, or have they addressed that yet?
The impression I've got from the developers is that if you have got a save game from The Witcher 2 and you want to bring that into The Witcher 3, as far as they've been willing to tell me, because I think they are still trying to keep something secret, when you start the game, you're asked whether or not you want to redocument the journeys of Geralt from previous Witcher games and how he got to this point. And I get the impression it's going to be a kind of a
Mass Effect comic kind of thing.
I get that vibe from them. Whether or not that is the case, I don't know. But if you don't want to do that, I think then that you previously, in some conversation choices, you get to bring up, you know, what you've done. And I think there's that kind of that knowing sensation between the NPC you're interacting with and you, that, oh yes, I remember this, and kind of like, and there's that little hint to it in the dialogue. So I don't think it's going to be a massive, it's going to have a massive impact on The Witcher 3. I think that the way it is, it seems that The Witcher 3 is probably not being treated as a reboot, but it feels like it's going to be a fresh start in some ways, even though it is the third in the series. But there are going to be a lot of knowing winks, a lot of knowing nods, and a lot of references that a lot of only fans are going to pick up on.
So, like, I'm getting the feeling that you can jump into The Witcher 3, but if you have played 1 or 2, there will be instances where a character will say something and go, remember that? A collection of you? Yeah. And the other people can just move on. Yeah, exactly. Now, and a thing I've been scratching my head about, Ray, is the size of The Witcher 3. It's meant to be an astronomical fucking area where I always, I have this tussle in my head every day of my life, Ray, about just game sizes and how always it just seems to be, we have, do you see that other game? Well, fuck them, our game is massive. And I get that slight impression of The Witcher 3, but are they able to fill it with things?
Well, I mean, from the prologue area, I think it's designed to be a real taste of what's to come, and it's a big area. Verima is not a small area. There's about 5 hours worth of content there, I think, if you really look from top to bottom. But when you sort of push the map back out, you see that you've got about 5 different areas on top of that, and each area is much, 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 much bigger. My question to the developers at the time was, obviously, you know, like you say, things seem to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger all the time. And the prologue is a nice indication of the quests and the things you get to do, but is that going to be sustained throughout? And they seem confident it will be. They're confident that they've got a game that they've built. They've not built it to be big. The amount of ideas and content they had have made it this big.
Right, I get you, yeah.
Which I think, to me, it's a nice way to put it, and it does makes me feel optimistic that, you know, whether or not I'm on hour 1 of The Witcher 3 or I'm on hour 55, I'm still going to have a lot of interesting stuff to do. All
in all, thoughts seem to be very positive. Was there anything that irked you in your time with The Witcher?
No, I think that, I mean, there are a few issues with the build, which, you know, I think that it's still a few months away from launch and they are still actively working on it. There are a few responsiveness, for instance, when I was trying to gallop on the horse, it didn't feel quite as responsive as I wanted it to, but again, I think that's just a case of tidying things up and, you know, as progressing as a build. Effectively, I'll treat it like a beta still. But all in all, I think it's very, very positive. I think The Witcher 3 has a very good chance of getting every Game of the Year award this year. It's that type of game, you know. It feels like when you go into it, you feel like as soon as you start it, yeah, this is going to be good. This is going to consume me for 80, 100, 150 hours, whatever it takes to get to the end. This is going to be where I'm going to be sat for the next couple of weeks. It's got all the hallmarks of making a great game, and has got a very good chance of being the one everyone remembers come December.
Excellent. I couldn't be happier to hear that, Ray. So thank you very much, Ray, for chatting to me about The Witcher. And I suppose we can all look forward to May.